He arrived early as he always did, to open the doors of the car dealership he'd spent his whole life dreaming of owning. By the time the sun fully crested the horizon, he was on his face, hands cuffed behind his back against a gleaming Lexus, a victim of the police who refused to believe he belonged. Terrence Bledsoe was a man of quiet substance, not one to flaunt a flashy watch or a high-end sports car as a trophy of his success. That morning, as light pierced the clouds above the Gulf Freeway, he pulled into the Lakeview Auto Group lot in a 2018 Chevy Silverado, its windshield cracked, a toolbox rattling in the bed. He parked in the same far corner spot he'd used a decade prior as a floor technician at a different dealership, a place where old habits die hard. His attire was simple. A clean, unassuming hoodie, pressed jeans, and a black baseball cap smudged faintly with oil. Terrence was here to work, not to impress. At 42 he had finally bought the business. It had been an uphill battle. His credit was decent but not impeccable. The first bank dismissed him outright, claiming the used car market's margins were too thin to justify the loan. The second made him wait 6 months, demanding a mountain of paperwork, cash flow statements, and more. But when the approval finally came, Terrence signed the documents with his wife, Denise, at his side, her eyes welling with the tears of a woman who had never stopped believing even when he had. He stepped out of his truck and locked it. The lot was quiet. The dealership was 2 hours from opening and most employees would trickle in around 9. He had an early meeting with Doug Rivers from Baytown Tire and Parts, a man so old school he insisted on delivering invoices by hand, distrusting email. Terrence appreciated that kind of personal touch. The one-on-one handshake deals that had built his reputation in Southeast Texas, not slogans on social media or chasing news cycles. He retrieved his backpack, which held only a laptop, some papers, and his lunch, leftover brisket. As he crossed the pavement, he paused to look at the sign, Lakeview Auto Group Used Certified New. The old owner's name, Grant Weatherford, was still on the directory, but that was slated to change by Friday. New signs, new nameplates, a refreshed website. Terrence respected the past, he just intended to build on it. He was approaching the main office when he noticed a silver sedan, possibly a Hyundai Sonata, slowly pulling up across the street. He didn't give it much thought. People often slowed down to admire the high-end cars. That morning, a silver 2023 Lexus GX was on display with fewer than 2,000 miles. Terrence pulled his keys from his jacket pocket, unlocked the front door and deactivated the alarm. He dropped his backpack on the front desk and flipped on the lights. The room filled with the soft hum of fluorescent tubes. He stretched and yawned, then stepped back outside to ensure the back gate was secure before Doug arrived. That's when he saw the patrol car pull into the lot. He didn't immediately register the threat. Police cars sometimes stopped by for coffee or to patrol after hours. But this one didn't slow down. It sped in, angling to block his truck. Terrence's eyebrow lifted. Before he could speak, a second cruiser pulled in. 2 officers emerged, both white, both with grim expressions. One fiddled with his belt, the other rested a hand on his holster. They advanced on him. "Can I help you?" Terrence asked, his voice even. The taller officer, nameplate Renshaw, tilted his head. "Yeah, you can. What are you doing here?" Terrence blinked. "Excuse me. This lot's closed. We got a call about someone tampering with vehicles." Terrence's brows knitted, but his hands remained at his sides. "I own this place. I just got in early." The shorter officer, Dugan, narrowed his eyes. "You got ID?" "It's inside," Terrence replied. "The office is open. I can show you the—" Renshaw cut him off. "Stay right there. Keep your hands where I can see them." A knot of dread formed in Terrence's chest, but the full weight of the situation didn't hit until Renshaw stepped closer and unclipped his handcuffs. 10 minutes before those handcuffs were ever unlatched, a man named Howard Dillon was sipping burnt coffee in a tan house with peeling paint across the street. A retired electrician who had worked on oil rigs since '88, Howard spent his mornings complaining about things he didn't understand. Loud cars, teenagers on scooters, the new family next door. Today his subject was Terrence Bledsoe. He had watched the Silverado arrive, seen Terrence get out and head toward the office with his backpack, and then watched him step back out. Nothing truly strange, yet Howard didn't recognize him, and that was enough to trigger his oft-repeated thought. That don't look right. He picked up his phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Yeah, I live on Beechnut Lane right across from Lakeview Auto. I think someone's trying to break into the dealership. The dispatcher paused. Did you see anyone break in? Well, he's fiddling with the front door and walking around. He's got a backpack. Something's off. Did you see any tools? Did he force entry? No tools, but he's just walking around like he owns the place, looking in the cars. What does the person look like? Tall black guy, hoodie and jeans. Look, I know the guy who used to own that place. This guy ain't him. The dispatcher's voice remained calm. Okay, sir, we'll send officers to check it out. Howard hung up, closed his blinds and settled back into his recliner. His coffee was cold, but he felt a sense of self-righteous satisfaction, as if he had single-handedly protected his neighborhood. Less than 4 blocks away, Officers Kyle Renshaw and Brent Dugan were wrapping up a traffic stop. The dispatch call came over the radio. Possible break-in at Lakeview Auto, corner of Beechnut and Hollowell. Male, late 30s or 40s, African-American, backpack, hoodie. Caller says he appears to be tampering with vehicles. Renshaw mumbled something under his breath. Dugan looked up from the citation he was writing. That used to be Weatherford's place, right? Yeah, Renshaw said, tossing the clipboard onto the dashboard. He's probably trying to strip parts before they open. Another note came over the dispatch. Caller says subject claimed he owns the property. Doesn't believe him. Renshaw scoffed. Of course he did. They didn't activate their lights or sirens. They just drove over, convinced of the outcome before they even arrived. At the dealership, Terrence was oblivious. He was thinking about next week's inventory, Q4 sales goals, and the perpetually failing air conditioner. He hadn't noticed the first patrol car until it was blocking his truck, and when the second one appeared he felt a sharp jolt. Not fear, not yet, but a strange unease. Something was wrong. When they approached, he did everything he thought he should. No sudden movements, a neutral tone, a clear statement of his purpose. I own this place, he repeated as Renshaw asked again. My name's Terrence Bledsoe. Just took over a few weeks ago. Dugan stood to the side, his hands on his waist. You got anything in that backpack we should know about? Laptop lunch. Just meeting a supplier this morning. You can check inside. Put your hands on the hood, Renshaw ordered, interrupting. Excuse me? You're not listening. Do it now. The shift became something more than unease. Terrence's heart pounded, his mouth went dry. His feet were rooted to the spot, but every muscle urged him to run. He resisted, knowing better. He slowly turned and placed his palms flat on the warm hood of the Lexus. He heard the cuffs click open behind him. We'll figure it out at the station if we have to, Dugan said. But help was already on the way. Terrence just didn't know it. Terrence stood, hands on the hood of a car he technically owned. He was struck by the bitter irony. Just days ago he'd signed the finance agreements for this very Lexus. Now he was being cuffed on it like a petty thief. Officer Renshaw yanked one wrist behind his back without a word. The cuff was immediate, tight and cruel. Dugan stood watch as if Terrence might flee, despite not having moved an inch. I told you my name is Terrence Bledsoe, he said again. I'm not being difficult, but if you just check the office. You think we're just gonna let someone say they own the place and walk off? Renshaw barked. I don't have to say it, I do own it. The keys are on the front desk. You can literally see the contract with my name. Dugan leaned in. You always show up this early, Mr. Bledsoe? Yeah, I do. That's what owners do. The second cuff closed around his other wrist, tighter than the first. Renshaw gave it a slight upward tug, not enough to break the skin but enough to send a message. Watch your tone, he muttered. Terrence clenched his jaw, his eyes fixed on the gravel near the Lexus's bumper. The dealership felt foreign now, as if he were on someone else's property. He could still smell the wax from the night before, a scent that brought him back to his days as a porter. You got ID? Dugan asked. Inside my backpack. Or my wallet in my jacket pocket. You're welcome to check. Neither officer moved. They didn't even glance toward the building. It was clear they weren't interested in confirming anything. They just wanted control. How do you say you came to own this place? Dugan finally asked. I bought it from Grant Weatherford. Closed the deal 3 weeks ago. Valeria Moreno is my general manager. She's probably on her way in now. Renshaw smirked, a mocking smile. You expect me to believe a guy in a hoodie bought a dealership? Terrence didn't reply. What was there to say? The question didn't deserve an answer. A few feet away, his backpack lay on the concrete, its zipper slightly ajar, revealing a folder with the Lakeview Auto Group logo. They didn't notice. From inside a parked Camry, Deja McMillan was already filming. She'd arrived 5 minutes early as usual and was listening to a podcast. At first she thought it was just a normal police stop, but the moment she saw Terrence in cuffs her stomach dropped. She knew his walk, his voice, his quiet sense of purpose. She hit record, keeping her phone low with only part of her face visible. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She texted Valeria with one hand, "Desh, something bad is happening. Cops cuffed Mr. B out front. You need to come now." Back outside, Renshaw turned Terrence around and led him slowly toward the front door, his own front door. Dugan followed. "You gonna let me open it?" Terrence asked. "The keys are on the desk. Or are you going to kick it in and explain that to my insurance?" Renshaw didn't answer. Instead he reached for the handle. It was unlocked, just as Terrence had said. The lights were on. "Stay right here," Dugan ordered. "Don't move." Terrence's eyebrow raised. "Don't think I have a choice, do I?" They left him standing there, cuffed and furious, now fully aware that this wouldn't end with a simple apology. Inside, the officers moved slowly, not looking for evidence of ownership, but for anything to justify their actions. At that very moment, Valeria Moreno was flying down Hollowell Avenue, gripping the steering wheel. Her hair was unbrushed. She dropped her dog's food bowl when Deja's text came through. She'd worked at Lakeview for 11 years through 5 owners. She knew every title, every employee's birthday. Terrence was her boss now, but more than that, he was a man who respected everyone from managers to the part-time window cleaner. And someone had him in handcuffs outside. Terrence stood by the glass door, wrists burning. Renshaw and Dugan had entered and exited twice without speaking to him. Now they were rifling through folders and drawers at the reception desk. "Anything in here prove ownership?" Dugan asked. Renshaw shrugged. "Got a contract, some documents with the name, Bledsoe, on the letterhead. Could have been printed at Kinko's for all we know." Terrence let out a low laugh. "Man, you're looking at the truth and you still don't want to see it." Dugan stepped back outside. "You say something?" "I said you found the documents you need, but you don't want them to mean anything. That's different. You keep running your mouth, we can find more charges," Dugan threatened. "Charges for what?" Terrence snapped, losing the calm he'd held onto. "For opening my own business? For showing up before sunrise like every owner I ever admired." Dugan looked poised to say something worse, but his radio crackled. "Be advised," the dispatcher said. "We're getting a second call confirming the individual may be the new owner. Someone named Moreno is en route. She identified him by name." Renshaw came to the door. "What's that about?" Dugan repeated the message. Just then Valeria's SUV screeched into the lot. She flung the door open and marched toward them. "Officers," she shouted. "That's Terrence Bledsoe. He owns this dealership. He's my employer." Renshaw held up a hand. "Ma'am, we're in the middle of a..." "No, you're not. You're detaining a man for walking onto his own property. You see that badge card on the window with his name on it? That was put there yesterday." She pushed past them and went to Terrence. "You good?" she asked. Yeah, he muttered. "Better now." She turned back to the officers. "Check the desk, first drawer on the left. There's a photo of the new ownership ceremony with Mr. Weatherford. See the suit? That's the same guy you've got in handcuffs." Dugan hesitated. Renshaw looked irritated, as if she were ruining his perfectly good mistake. They went back inside, this time with less bravado. Terrence shifted his feet, wincing as the cuffs pinched his wrists. Valeria stood beside him. "You want me to call someone? I already texted Denise not to come. Don't want her seeing you like this." Inside, the officers eventually found what they couldn't ignore. Signed contracts, official letterhead, and Terrence's business license. They walked back out, slower than before. Renshaw spoke first. "We're going to take the cuffs off. There's been a miscommunication." Terrence said nothing. Dugan walked behind him and unlocked the cuffs. The metal parted, scraping his red skin. He pulled his hands forward, rubbing the marks on his wrists. "No apology?" Valeria asked. "Not even a sorry for the mistake?" "We were responding to a call," Renshaw mumbled. "We followed procedure." Procedure didn't involve asking one question, huh? Valeria scoffed. The two officers turned and walked to their cruisers, driving away without another word. Terrence stood there for a few more seconds, breathing through the ache in his arms. He looked up at the dealership sign, then picked up his backpack, opened the front door and went inside. But Deja's phone was still recording, and what it had captured would travel farther than any of them could have imagined. Deja McMillan had never posted a viral video. Her social media was filled with book recommendations, photos of her brother's basketball games, and clips from motivational podcasts. But when she saw Terrence being cuffed in front of his own dealership, something inside her broke. She kept her phone steady, barely breathing, capturing the entire interaction. Every time Renshaw raised his voice or twisted Terrence's wrist, her stomach churned. She wanted to scream, but she knew better. She had seen what happened to people who intervened, especially people who looked like her. So she stayed silent, recorded, and waited. When Valeria arrived and took control, Deja finally exhaled and hit stop. Her hands were shaking, not from fear but from a growing rage. She sent the video to Terrence's work phone without a word, then slowly walked toward the building. Terrence was sitting at his desk, a cold Dr. Pepper can pressed against the red welts on his wrist. Valeria stood nearby, arms crossed, staring out the window, replaying the scene. When Deja walked in, they both looked up. "I filmed it," she said. "From my car. I didn't know what else to do." Terrence didn't speak right away. His eyes were heavy, not with anger but with profound exhaustion. "You did right," he finally said. "Thank you." Valeria nodded. "That video might be the only reason they think twice next time." Deja hesitated. "I don't want to post it without your permission, but I sent it to you just in case." He gave her a tired smile. "Appreciate that." At the far end of the lot, Rami Elston, a new hire, had just arrived. He didn't know what had happened, but he could feel the palpable tension. The way Valeria barely greeted him, the look on Deja's face, and Terrence, who had been so proud to sit in that chair just days ago, now looked like he had aged a decade. "I'm going to grab coffee," Rami said softly. "No rush," Valeria replied. "We're not opening on time today." Word spread quickly. By noon the entire staff knew. Terrence didn't hold a meeting, he didn't need to. They'd heard the whispers, the text threads from Deja, the quiet retelling of what she had seen. And they all had questions no one wanted to answer. How did they not know who he was? Why didn't they just check? What if Valeria hadn't shown up? Terrence didn't have the answers. He sat in his office, staring at the file cabinets and the framed loan agreement, his untouched lunch still in his backpack. He could still feel the phantom pressure of the metal on his wrists. That afternoon he finally watched the video Deja had filmed. It captured everything. The officer's approach, the tone of their voices, him saying, "I own this place," 3 times, Renshaw twisting his arm, and then Valeria storming in like a character in a movie, her voice sharp and clear. The camera shook slightly at the end, but the footage was raw, real. He played it again and again. Valeria came in. "You thinking of releasing it?" "I don't know," he said. "What good does it do?" "It shows the truth," she replied. "That's a start." Terrence leaned back in his chair. "The truth doesn't mean much to people who've already made up their minds." She didn't argue, but she didn't leave. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Deja posted the video. She added a simple caption, "This is Terrence Bledsoe. He owns this dealership and he was cuffed on his own property. This is America in 2025. No tags, no hashtags. Just the facts." Facts she knew had a way of finding their audience when people were ready to listen. By the next morning, the video had over 80,000 views. Deja woke up to 300 new followers, a dozen messages thanking her, and a brief email from a local reporter at the Beaumont Ledger requesting an interview. She didn't respond. This wasn't about her. Terrence, however, hadn't looked at his phone at all. He made a conscious decision to start his day the way he always did, taking out the trash, checking the overnight inventory log, and brewing the burnt office coffee. He needed the routine, needed a sense of normalcy. But nothing felt normal. The looks from his staff were different, more cautious, more observant. They weren't pitying him. They were processing the image of their boss, a builder, being treated like a criminal on the very property he had built. Processing the fact that it could have been any of them. Valeria knocked on his door around 9:15. "You seen your name online today?" she asked. Terrence looked up. "Nope." Trying to keep my blood pressure steady. Well, she said, placing a tablet on his desk, it's too late for that. He sighed and tapped the screen. The video had exploded across Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, even Reddit. Most clips were short, but someone, he suspected Deja, had uploaded the full 2-minute version that showed the officers ignoring his calm words and the click of the cuffs. He scrolled through the comments. Unbelievable. They didn't even apologize. This is why people don't trust law enforcement. I've been Terrence more than once, but I didn't have cameras. There were trolls, of course, saying he should have complied faster, but they were quickly drowned out. He rubbed his temples. I didn't want this. I know, Valeria said gently. But people did. People needed to see it. Now what? Do I talk to the media? Do I let it blow over? She looked him square in the eyes. That's your call. But if you don't speak, someone else will. They'll fill in the blanks. He knew she was right. But the thought of going public, of standing in front of cameras and microphones, was unappealing. He didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted to sell cars, build a legacy, and go home to Denise and his daughter. Later that afternoon, as he stood behind the sales desk, an older black man in a maroon tracksuit walked in. He looked around, then came directly to Terrence. You the guy from the video? Terrence hesitated. Yeah. The man extended his hand. Name's Lewis. I'm looking for a new truck, but more than that, I wanted to shake your hand. Why? Terrence asked, confused. Because it takes a lot to keep your peace when someone's trying to break you in public. You did that. You didn't swing, you didn't shout. You just stood tall. Terrence was speechless. He shook the man's hand. Lewis smiled. I'll take a look at that Silverado outside. But I'm buying from you not out of pity but out of principle. As the man walked off, Terrence looked out the window. A small group had gathered in front of the dealership. Not a protest, just a few people holding signs. One read, We see you of Bledsoe. But seeing wasn't enough, Terrence knew. The real challenge was what to say next. By the end of the week, Terrence was a local celebrity. A woman at the grocery store gave him a free bottle of water and whispered, My nephew's been through something like that. Thank you for not staying quiet. A UPS driver honked and gave him a thumbs up. A white college student in a Prius handed him a handwritten note that said, I'm learning thanks to you. But the attention was a heavy burden. He hadn't slept well in days. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt the pinch of the steel cuffs and heard Renshaw's voice. His wife, Denise, urged him to take a day off, but he couldn't. If he stopped showing up, it would feel like they had taken something from him, and he wouldn't let that happen. Inside the dealership, the atmosphere had shifted. The employees, Deja, Rami, the technicians, all walked a little lighter, stood a little taller. They had seen what happened, but they had also seen his response. He hadn't lashed out or played the victim. He just showed up every day and did the work. Still, the aftermath lingered. On Tuesday, Terrence received a call from Detective Rowan Godfrey of the Internal Affairs Division. Godfrey's voice was cautious, as if talking to someone holding a live wire. I'd like to set up a time to speak, Mr. Bledsoe. We're reviewing the officer's conduct. You reviewing it because you care or because 200,000 people saw that video? Terrence asked. There was a pause. Both, sir. Terrence agreed to meet the next morning, but not alone. He called his longtime attorney, Trina Belfort, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had handled his real estate paperwork. She showed up in a gray pantsuit and flats and wasted no time on pleasantries. They want this to go away quietly, she said in the conference room. Expect phrases like policy breach and internal retraining. No one's going to take the fall unless you make them. I'm not trying to ruin lives, Terrence said. No, she agreed. But you're allowed to protect your own. The interview with Godfrey was slow and deliberate, filled with legal jargon. He asked what Terrence had felt, seen, and heard, and if the officers had used excessive force. Terrence told the unvarnished truth. At the end, Godfrey offered the predictable line, We'll be in touch. Trina muttered on the way out. Translation, they're hoping this dies down in a week. But it didn't. Local news stations had already picked up the story. Channel 12 ran a piece titled, Wrongfully Cuffed. Local business owner speaks out after mistaken arrest. It wasn't just the video anymore. It was headlines, articles, and editorials. The Austin Chronicle even ran a feature on racial bias in professional spaces, citing Terrence's experience. With the attention came pressure. Some online commenters called for him to sue the department. Others said he should be the face of a movement, and a few demanded the officers be fired immediately. Terrence was unsure how he felt. He didn't want revenge, but he wanted accountability, something more than silence. That night he sat on his back porch with Denise. "I didn't ask for this," he said quietly. She handed him a warm mug of tea. "No, you didn't. But sometimes what happens to you ends up meaning more to other people than it ever will to you." He looked at her. "You think I should speak out?" She nodded. "You already did. Now say the rest out loud." But Terrence knew that if he did that, there was no turning back. By Friday morning, Terrence's face was everywhere. The full video had been picked up by Good Morning Texas and national blogs. TikTok creators were stitching it. A high school teacher in San Diego used it in a media literacy class. A local hip-hop artist sampled Terrence's calm words, "I own this place," into a beat. Still, Terrence remained quiet. He hadn't given interviews, posted a statement, or spoken on camera. He was waiting. For what, he wasn't sure. Maybe the right moment, maybe for someone to ask the right question. Valeria brought in a stack of printed emails. People wanted to visit the lot, support the business, or just say they believed him. One message stood out. It was from Lamar Briggs, a small business owner in College Station who ran a barbershop. "Brother," Lamar wrote, "I can't afford to come buy a car, but I told every person who sat in my chair this week about what happened to you. And every one of them said, 'Yep, been there.' You're speaking for more people than you know. Keep your head up." Terrence read it 3 times. The pressure was building in the back of his neck, not from anger but from the weight of expectation. People didn't just see him anymore. They needed him to say something, to represent something, and he wasn't sure he had it in him. Midday he stepped out back for a smoke. He wasn't even a smoker, but he needed the air. Valeria found him 10 minutes later, leaning against the loading dock. "I've got 2 more outlets asking for a statement," she said. "One from Dallas, one from an NPR affiliate." He didn't look at her. "What am I supposed to say? That racism still exists? That some people still call the cops the moment they see a black man with keys instead of a uniform?" He wasn't really asking her. "I'm not trying to make speeches," he continued. "I just wanted to run a damn dealership." "You still are," she said. "Doesn't feel like it." She let the silence hang in the air. "You don't have to be a hero. But don't let people rewrite what happened. If you say nothing, they'll fill in the blanks." Later that day, Rami knocked on his office door. "Mr. B, there's a woman here asking for you. Didn't want to speak to sales." "Another reporter?" "No, I think she just saw the video." Terrence sighed and walked to the showroom. A middle-aged black woman in a floral blouse stood near the entrance, holding a manila envelope. "Mr. Bledsoe?" she said with a soft smile. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Regina Ellery. I teach U.S. history at Edison High in Pasadena." He shook her hand, a little confused. "I used to tell my students stories about men like you," she said. "Entrepreneurs, fighters, the kind who had to prove twice as much just to get half as far. But this week I showed them your video, told them your story, and they didn't flinch. They got it. Every single one." She handed him the envelope. "These are notes from my class. They wanted to thank you. Said you made them feel seen." That night he opened the envelope. Nearly 30 handwritten letters, some in cursive, others in block print, a few with hearts drawn in the corners. All of them were real. One read, "When they put the cuffs on you, it reminded me of my uncle. But when you stayed calm and stood tall, it reminded me of who I want to be." Terrence sat with those letters for over an hour. Then at 2 a.m. he turned on his phone camera, propped it up on his desk, and hit record. He didn't use a script. He didn't practice. He just spoke. "My name is Terrence Bledsoe. I own Lakeview Auto Group in Lawport, Texas. And what happened to me last Tuesday wasn't rare. It was just recorded. I stayed calm because I've had practice. Practice explaining myself. Practice being polite to people who don't see me." He paused, looking at his hands. "But I'm tired of practicing. I just want to be." The video was 3 minutes long. By sunrise, it had been watched 500,000 times, and silence was no longer an option. The moment he posted the video, something shifted. The comments didn't just come in, they flooded in. Thousands of messages from mechanics in Tennessee, single mothers in Michigan, college students in Louisiana, and veterans in Nevada. People who didn't know him, who had never heard of Lakeview Auto Group, yet felt a connection to what had happened in that parking lot. Terrence didn't check the numbers or watch the video again, but Denise and Valeria did. They sat in the break room reading message after message aloud. The staff was quieter that morning, not nervous but thoughtful. Everyone sensed that something larger was unfolding, and that their boss, Mr. B, was now part of a national conversation. The mayor of La Porte called, as did a state representative. The city issued a brief, perfunctory statement about community dignity and respect. Terrence ignored the press releases. What mattered to him now were the kids, the students who had written him, the quiet ones who had watched his video and felt like it explained their whole lives. He thought about them when he got the call from Patrice Van, the principal at James E. Grady Middle School. "We were wondering if you'd be willing to come speak to our 8th graders," she said. "Just about your journey. Not the viral part, the part before that." Terrence was hesitant. "I don't think I'm much of a public speaker." "That's not what they need," Miss Van replied. "They need someone real." So he said yes. A week later, he stood in front of 86 middle schoolers in sneakers and hoodies, their arms crossed, skeptical but curious. He started simply telling them about working at an oil change garage at 19, about the strange feeling of being called boss for the first time, about the years of rejection. Then he paused and told them about the handcuffs, about the split second when the officer ignored his words, about the quiet, casual force of being silenced. He told them that staying calm wasn't a gift. It was a skill he didn't want them to have to master. "You don't have to shout to be strong," he said, "but don't ever let silence be the last thing they hear from you." Some kids clapped, some were quiet, but all of them listened. Afterward, a boy named Kalen walked up to him and asked, "Did they ever say sorry?" Terrence shook his head. "Not once." The boy nodded slowly. "They should have." That moment resonated with him more than anything. Back at the dealership, things were returning to a rhythm. The viral attention had brought in new business, but it had also brought in questions. Reporters still circled and opportunists reached out, a few even asking if he'd consider running for office. Terrence just laughed. "I sell cars," he'd say, "not dreams." Still, the impact lingered. He decided to start a new program, the Ownership Track, a mentorship for young Black professionals interested in auto sales, finance, or dealership operations. Every month they would meet with him and the team, learning what it really meant to own something. When Valeria asked him why he wanted to do it, he answered simply, "Because I don't want the next Terrence to get cuffed in his own parking lot." The first meeting had 4 kids, then 10, then 23. Each came with questions and each left with a notebook, a name badge, and a reminder, "You belong in the room even when they act like you don't." Terrence wasn't trying to change the world, just his corner of it. And for the first time in weeks he felt like he was actually doing it. But as he drove home that night, windows down and radio off, he knew one last thing still needed to be said. The final video wasn't planned. There was no script, no camera crew, no special lighting. Just Terrence, alone in the back office, long after everyone had gone home. He sat at the same desk he'd been cuffed near and stared into his phone's lens. "I've been quiet most of my life," he began. "Taught to keep my head down, do the work, stay out of trouble. Taught that if I worked twice as hard I'd get half as far, and I'd have to be grateful for even that." He glanced down, then looked back at the camera. "But when I bought this place I didn't do it just for me. I did it for every person who came before me and wasn't allowed to. For the folks who paved roads but never got to drive them." He paused. "You might have seen the video. You saw what happened. I didn't post it to make noise. I posted it because I needed people to understand that being successful doesn't make you safe. That having paperwork, keys, contracts, and ownership doesn't shield you from being seen as a threat. Not to everyone." His voice didn't crack, but the weight was there. They didn't see an owner. They saw a hoodie. They saw skin, and they assumed the rest. He took a slow, steady breath. But what came after? That's the part one want to talk about. The letters. The handshakes. The classroom visits. The people who showed up not with judgment but with solidarity. That's what gives me hope. He leaned back. "I'm not here to call anyone out. But I am here to remind you. If you believe in fairness, then your silence matters just as much as your voice. If you care about justice, you can't only speak up when it's easy." He reached into a drawer and pulled out one of the student letters. "Some kid asked me if they ever apologized. They didn't. And maybe they won't. But that's not the ending. The ending is what we choose to do after the damage is done." He folded the paper gently and set it back down. This is a car lot. We sell cars here. But lately we've been selling something else too. Dignity. Integrity. A reason to believe that maybe we don't have to keep repeating the same story. He gave a small smile. So if you've ever been looked at like you didn't belong, know this. You do. If they made you feel small, remind yourself who you are. If they try to write your story without your permission, take the pen back. He reached forward and stopped the recording. The next morning he posted it without a caption. The views didn't matter. The reach didn't matter. He hadn't filmed it for clicks. He had filmed it to release what had been building since the cuffs first clamped shut. The reaction was quieter this time. No hashtags, no trending pages. Just a steady stream of messages. Some were just 2 words, thank you. Others were paragraphs. A few came from police officers who watched it and said they saw themselves in it and weren't proud of that. Back at the dealership, business was steady, the mentorship program grew, and the staff found a new rhythm. Customers still mentioned the video, but less and less each week. What remained was stronger than buzz. It was trust. Terrence stood outside one afternoon, watching a young man in the program walk customers through a financing plan. He didn't interrupt, just observed, then walked back inside. He had started the year as just another man trying to run a business. He ended it as something else entirely. Not a symbol, not a victim, but a man who refused to let the world decide what kind of story he was allowed to live.